I have disappeared.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Yeah, so, okay, we'll just get going immediately. We'll wind up with Manu. Okay, let me, I've always been trying to say something about Gandhi, and that's when I get cut off. So I thought I'll start with Gandhi today. Now, when we look at Gandhi, I'm not talking about him here as a philosopher, which he is in his own right. Okay, though derivative. I say his derivative because he has derived his uh, philosophy from the Sanatana Dharma of the ancient period. Okay, in my younger days, not just as a student, even as a teacher, I told you I was appointed very young, and uh, I didn't realize that Gandhi was a scholar of Sanatana Dharma. So when I wrote a paper on Ambedkar, and in that uh, I was considering the what should I say, the debate that took place between Gandhi and Ambedkar on issues which were uh, of the this thing on the origins of the caste system. Okay, Ambedkar believed that it was always an evil system, and he refused to call it a Varna system. And on the other hand, Gandhi refused to call it a caste system. He said it was a Varna system, later perverted by, in his words, Brahminical religion. Okay. And he said that if you get rid of the Brahminical religion and look at Sanatana Dharma, okay, then what you actually find is that the Varna system is each man's natural calling, which is, he said, each man's ability. Okay, Gandhi is not an easy person to understand. Gandhi is a complex man, and that is the reason why today people have branded him a casteist. They have called him all kinds of terrible things, terrible names, which he doesn't deserve at all. In my opinion, he is one of the greatest people that India produced in all times. Okay, and not just India, a great person across the world. I have once quoted Einstein, and Einstein unfortunately turned out to be wrong thanks to our own people. Einstein said, generations in the future will find it extremely difficult to believe that a man like Mahatma Gandhi actually lived and walked the earth. That's what he said. And he said, what Gandhi brings to the world is unprecedented. Not even Jesus Christ has brought what Gandhi has brought. Okay, one of my closest friends today says, what did Gandhi do? He begged for freedom from the British. That is what we have come to. Anyway, that's a different issue. But what I want to tell you is that I told you there is a critique of the caste system as practiced by the Brahmins, as introduced and practiced by the Brahmins. Uh, and that critique is that he wanted to Shudraize the whole of uh, Indian society. Okay, he believed that the best and most noble castes, he said there is no Panchama Varna. He said it is the Shudra Varna, which is the one that works hard. They work with their hands. And therefore, he said they are productive. Okay, if you remember, I also told you one more quotation of his, where he said the Aryas, the Aryans he refers to as Aryas, he said the Aryas have taken the people who perform the most important tasks of running a society and keeping it clean and keeping it going. They have taken these important people who also generate social wealth and reduce them to anaryas. The Aryas he's referring to are the Brahmins. Okay, he's basically referring, that's why he doesn't say Aryan. Aryan can become something else, but Arya is a definite reference only to the Brahmins. So this part of Gandhi has not been understood. But that apart, I would like to draw your attention today to one of the things that Gandhi says, which is that since everything has been transmitted by word of mouth, okay, uh, he says uh, one should not look for consistency, not just in the Manusmriti. I was talking yesterday to you about the Manusmriti. He says it's not just in the Manusmriti that there is no consistency, because there are so many contradictory uh, things within the Manusmriti, the 50 documents that go by the name of Manusmriti, which have been renamed Manusmriti and not Manudharma Shastra. Okay, so he said there are all kinds of contradictions in them, and you can't take it as one unified body of knowledge, because that is contradicting itself. So it's not one unified body of knowledge. So what he said is one should derive the good things that one talks about, I mean, rather, Manu talks about, derive those good things, keep them. And for him, the most important thing that came from the Manusmriti was the concept of non-violence, and the other was the implementation of Nyaya, justice. These, he says, have to be taken from the Manusmriti. This is what has led to him being called a Manuvadi. He said the rest of the Manusmriti can be ignored. He says the same thing about Dharma Shastras. He said because of repeated telling, because it was an oral tradition, right? It is a repeated telling of the stories that created contradictions even in the Dharma Shastras and in the, what do we say, in the Vedas and their interpretations. Okay, there are all kinds of contradictions, and he says you should not accept that as one whole text, or one should not take it as one unified body of learning. So he said Sanatana Dharma can be recreated. Okay, Sanatana Dharma can be recreated by picking out. cherry picking, as the British call it, picking out those aspects which are good, those aspects which emphasize on commodious living and community being of human beings. Okay, those are the points he says that should be picked up. So he's also going one step ahead and saying Vedanta also is not a consistent body, not a consistent body of knowledge. There are many inconsistencies, and the inconsistencies stem from contradictory inferences drawn by people over time. This is actually in stark contrast to what Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan did. Okay, Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, our first vice president and second president of India, was a very major scholar, very major scholar of philosophy. And he believed that Vedanta was one unified system of knowledge. Okay, so this is a lesser known fact about both Gandhi and Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan. Okay, the lesser known fact is that they had debates about Vedanta. They had many debates about Vedanta, in which Gandhi insisted that Vedanta is not a unified body of learning. Okay, it is a fragmented body, and you have to pick up those aspects of Vedanta which are good, and not all aspects of Vedanta. Okay, so therefore he said Sanatana Dharma can be replicated in the modern period, in modern India, because of the fact that you can pick out the good points from both Vedanta and from the Manusmriti as well, and leave out the bad points. That is what he said. Now, there are a number of reactionary philosophers. By that I mean the extreme right-wing philosophers, who believe that the Manusmriti is as old as Vedanta. And I told you, Vedanta is much older. It's probably a few thousand years older than the Manusmriti, which is dated around 1250 BCE to 1000 BCE. It was around somewhere in this time period it came into being, whereas Vedanta goes back to the 12th century, 11th century BCE, and maybe even before that. So obviously Vedanta and Manusmriti is not the basis of Vedanta at all. Okay, it is something which is a later on addition, and therefore one should not see this as the right-wing historians do today as the basis of all Vedanta. It is not. Okay, and that is where Gandhi is somebody who is very important, because he's asking you to reject, even from what has been constructed and construed as uh, uh, Vedanta and Sanatana Dharma. He said you have to reject, you have to be very careful, you have to reject, and you have to take on some things which are necessary. And therefore, he also talked about the necessity for social reform. But his idea, definitely, which is what one will be talking about in the fourth semester, and that is real independence. real Swaraj, as he called, is nothing but independence of villages. India lives in its villages, and Gram Swaraj is the basis of all Swaraj. And he didn't want, he wanted each of these villages to be like the Janapadas. I'm mentioning this here because he makes a reference to the Janapadas. He wanted it to be like a self-contained thing with no necessity or a minimal necessity to to have some kind of a relationship of sorts with other Janapadas or other villages in the case here. So if you look at Gandhi, therefore, Gandhi is suggesting that we adopt Sanatana Dharma by cherry picking the good points of it and going back to a commodious life in small communities. So that's where the Panchayat Samiti system came. It came from the Janapadas. Okay, so he talked about governance through the Janapada, through the Panchayat Samiti, right? So he wanted a recreation of that ancient period minus all the negative points in it. But the right-wing historians claim otherwise, and they say that Manudharma Shastra is, they don't call it Manusmriti, they say Manudharma Shastra, and they say that it is the uh, one Dharma Shastra that is supposed to be followed by everyone. In fact, they also say that Jainism and Buddhism both drew their ideas of dharma and karma from the Manu Dharma Shastra. And therefore, they see Buddhism and Jainism as subsets of what they call Hinduism. The right-wing historians call this Hinduism, and they have made a religion out of a philosophical system, and they call this Haindava Dharma. They do not use the term Sanatana Dharma, they use the term Haindava, okay, from Hindu, Haindava. But I told you, please remember that it is not uh, an Indian word at all, Hindu. It is a Persian Arabic word. Okay, and they said its influences can be seen in Buddhism and Jainism as well, which is entirely wrong, because today we see that if Manu and his Smriti is located somewhere in between 1250 CE and 1000 sorry, not CE, BCE and 1000 BCE, then obviously Buddhism and Jainism could not have drawn from this. Buddha lived somewhere in between the 5th and the 4th century BCE. So he precedes Manu by a couple of centuries. Okay, and Jainism, I told you, most of us think that Buddhism is an older religion, and Jainism came after Buddhism. But strictly speaking, it is not the case. What came to be called Jainism, okay, was something that came into being in the 10th century BCE. Okay, and one of the first Tirthankaras and the founder of this school of thought is believed to be what people, some people, who some people call Parsva only, and others call Parsvanatha, Parsvanatha, Parsvanatha. Okay, and many people think that Jainism began with Mahavira. It did not begin with Mahavira. Mahavira was a contemporary of the Buddha around the 5th century. Okay, though there is no evidence that Mahavira and the Buddha ever met. There is no evidence of that. But Jainism is an older system of thought. Now, let me tell you another reason why, even if you believe somebody has dated the Manusmriti wrongly and has said that, you know, the Manusmriti is not from 1250 to 1000, it should be somewhere else. Okay, it was much older than that. Even in that case, it still had no influence whatsoever on either Jainism or Buddhism, because Jainism is completely far removed from the idea of Sanatana Dharma. Okay, it is far removed from the idea of Sanatana Dharma. And when I say it is far removed, what exactly do we mean? Now, the Jains don't believe in creationism. Okay, the others say creation. Even Sanatana Dharma talks about creation. Okay, I told you about the Yuga cycle, right? There are 4 yugas in every cycle. There is the Krita Yuga, which some people call Satya Yuga. Then there is the Treta Yuga, then the Dwapara Yuga, the Kali Yuga. And in the Kali Yuga, adharma becomes so much that the world can no longer take it, and therefore you have Pralaya, which is the ending of the world. Okay, and after the ending, again you have Srishti, which is creation. And again you start with the Treta Yuga. Again you go back to a, you know, not Treta Yuga. You start with the Krita Yuga, go to the Treta Yuga. So the cycle goes on, right? That is what is to be found in Sanatana Dharma. So there's creationism in Sanatana Dharma. But if you look at uh, the Jain version, there is no creationism. Their understanding of the cosmos is that it is something that has always been there. Okay, it has always been there and it is never going to go away. That is the kind of thing that you find in Jainism. Okay, and I'm calling it Jainism because by and large, Jainism and ism is always a body of knowledge which is consistent in everything that it says. There will be no contradictions within an ism. If there are contradictions, then that is no longer an ism. Okay, it doesn't have to be a religion. A systematized philosophy can be an ism. So Jainism is not a religion. It is a systematized way of life based in what to do and what not to do, which is not what you find in Dharma, in Sanatana Dharma. Okay, so Jains also don't talk about karma. Jains don't talk about karma. Similarly, people who talk about the Buddha, they say Buddha when he became the Bodhisattva, okay, he transcended karma. It is not there in Buddhism. Okay, you don't find the word karma in Buddhism. What you find in Buddhism is the idea that a soul goes through many different lives, and when it becomes enlightened, it is then that it breaks the cycle of life and death and becomes a pure Atma. It becomes a pure Atman or an Atma and is not born again. That is being a Bodhisattva. When you become a Bodhisattva, what you are claiming is that you overcome the cycle of life and death and you have attained nirvana. Nirvana in Pali, and Buddha preferred Pali to Sanskrit, and it is called Nibbana. Okay, in Pali, nirvana is called Nibbana. I'll talk about that in a little bit of a detail a little later. Okay, now can we basically say that Buddhism is a subset of Sanatana Dharma system? Because that is what, again, some of the right-wing philosophers and historians argue, right? In fact, if you take the Dashavatara of the Vishnu, okay, the Vishnu is not bad English, the Vishnu, because it is the Vishnu is that spirit that permeates the whole world. In the Dashavataras, before the Krishna Avatara or the Krishna Avatara, there was a Balarama Avatara, okay, which was later replaced by Buddha. So after Rama, there was Balarama and then there was Krishna. But Balarama was removed. After Rama came Krishna, and after Krishna came the Buddha. So Buddhism has also been absorbed, so to speak, through gerrymandering. I used this word before. I'm not going to go into explanation of that. But anyway, for one quick reminder, gerrymandering is without fighting, without confronting, incorporating something into an already existing system of thought. Okay, so Shaivism, which is supposed to be older than Vaishnavism, became a part of this whole system by creating the Trimurtis, the Brahma, Vishnu, Parameshwara. Okay, the Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the maintainer of balance, and Shiva is the destroyer. That is not there in Vedanta, or it is not there in anything in Sanatana Dharma. This is a Brahminical intervention to incorporate Shaivites into their religion. And if you look at the thing that they did with the Buddha, because the Buddha was not anti-Sanatana Dharma. You must understand this. The Buddha drew quite a bit from Sanatana Dharma, but he was anti-Brahmin. Okay, he was against the practices of the Brahmins. I'll go into those details a little later. But what we need to remember here is that the Buddha definitely is not somebody who went totally against the Sanatana Dharma system. as we would find in the case of Jainism, there is no connection between the two. It's very difficult to establish a connection between Sanatana Dharma and Jainism, but it is not so difficult to establish a connection between Buddhism and Sanatana Dharma. Now let's try to answer one particular question. The question is Buddhism an ism? Okay, that is what we need to understand. Is Buddhism an ism? Okay, Hinduism is definitely not an ism. If you remember what I told you, even if you accept the word Hindu, there is no Hinduism. There is no Hinduism. I told you Hinduism is a synecdoche. I hope you remember that term, SYNEC, synec, DOCHE, ducky. Okay, it's written synecdoche, but it is pronounced synecdoche, where you confuse a part with the whole. Okay, so there are different forms of so-called Hinduism. Why? Because people have been, confusing a part with the whole. The followers of Shankara, Adi Shankara, that is Shankaracharya, they believe that their form is Hinduism. Ramanujacharya's followers, the Alvars, as they are called, and those people who ushered in the Bhakti movement, they believe that is Hinduism. The followers of Madhvacharya, they are very small in number, but the followers of Madhvacharya believe that that is Hinduism. But there are inconsistencies among all these. Okay, if you take Tamilians, for instance, the Iyyars are mainly Shaivites, mainly. The Iyyangars are mainly Vaishnavites, right? And so they don't see eye to eye. They basically don't see eye to eye. And in Tamil Nadu, funnily enough, even among the Vaishnavite tradition, there is this thing of how you put your namam. Okay, the namam that you put, there are two types. One is called the U namam. It's shaped like a U. The other is like a Y. Okay, the Bhakti movement, the Alvars and Ramanuja's people, Ramanuja's students, they believed in the idea of the Vainamam. Okay, whereas the others believed in the Unamam. Now, in one of the temples, I think it was the Madurai temple only, the elephants became a subject of controversy because some people said that they should wear the Unamam. They should put a Unamam on the elephants that belong to the temple. Then there was the other sect which said, no, you should put a Vainamam. Then they fought about this whole thing for quite some time. It went to finally to British courts in India. Okay, and when the British courts found that they were not able to adjudicate, they kept pushing up higher and higher to the next court. So much so that finally it went to the Star Chamber in the House of Lords in London. Okay, it went there because the highest court of appeal was the Star Chamber in the House of Lords. The House of Lords is still, by the way, one of the highest courts of appeal. And there was this uh, Star Chamber. It went there. And what happened? What happened was that they sat on it for a while. And now that they couldn't push it anywhere, they said 15 days in a month, put Unamam for the elephant, and 15 days in a month, you put Vainamam. Okay, that is the verdict they gave. In the meantime, the elephant died. Most of the elephants started dying. Okay, so the idea is that even in the so-called Vaishnavite faith, there is no unity. So there is no Hinduism. So is there a Buddhism then? That is the question. Can we talk about a Buddhism? For a long time, people believed, yes, one can talk about a Buddhism. Okay. And that this Buddhism has some kind of a connection, so to speak, with the Sanatana Dharma system in its uncorrupted form. That is basically what a lot of people felt. But as is the case with most things, controversies came up even in Buddhism with different schools of thought emerging over a period of time in Buddhism. Okay, so what are these schools of thought, or what are these forms of thought which are there in Buddhism? You have one which is called Mahayana. Okay, Maha, Mahayana, Mahayana Buddhism. This is one form of Buddhism. Then there is what is called the Hinayana, Hinayana, Hinayana Buddhism. And there is also another school of thought, which is called the Theravada school of Buddhism. Theravada. Okay, these are some of the prominent schools. There are also some other groups, not very well known. So I don't want to go deep into that and make this a thing of theology. Okay, but the way Buddhism spread, the way the whole idea of Buddhism spread across from North India upward into China, into the whole of Southeast Asia, okay, into the whole of Southeast Asia, and right up to Japan, you will find that people believe Buddhism can be seen as an organized body of thought with no contradictions within it. That's what people believe. The Theravada school especially disputes this. The Theravada school of Buddhism disputes this.